Welcome to Transforming Us podcast. I'm Jess.
And I'm Tamara. We're trauma-informed relationship coaches and old friends here to discuss common patterns and what leads us to paths of security.
You know, people are feeling overwhelmed and disconnected in their painful relationships, which often leads to mental health crises.
We want to share some new ideas and practices to help you cultivate curiosity, compassion, and to redeem the patterns in your relationships, starting with yourself.
Join us on this journey of transforming us. Grab a cup of coffee and let's dive in. Welcome back to Transforming Us podcast, friends. I'm so excited. Today, I have a good friend of mine, Sarah McCrory, and I've known her since 2021 and met her and her husband at a soul care retreat, and we just became fast friends. So I'll tell you a little bit about her. Sarah is the owner and director of Sanctuary Counseling and Wellness, which is near her home in Montgomery, Alabama. She's married to Jared, has 2 daughters and 2 crazy dogs and 1 temperamental cat. She and Jared founded the counseling practice on the belief that a true sanctuary is a place of rest and retreat where you can feel a sense of peace and safety. Sarah is a licensed professional counselor and a registered play therapist. Her work focuses on helping people heal from attachment trauma and other challenges, with a specialized emphasis on working with children. She's trained in several specialties like EMDR and TheraPlay, as well as TBRI, which a lot of foster parents and adoptive families know about, trust-based relational intervention. And these are all essential for addressing trauma in the family system. So welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. So good to be here. Excited to see you.
I'm excited to see you. I've been really looking forward to this conversation and just catching up. It's been too long.
Definitely.
So why don't you tell us a little bit more about your family and your practice?
Okay. So Jared and I have been married for almost 24 years. 24 years in December. We have 2 daughters. Ella she just left us to go to college. She's started at Auburn in the fall, and Lainey is 16. So she got her driver's license at the same time, literally like a week apart. And so I'm handling it. But everything changed all at once. So we've been in Montgomery on and off for our whole marriage. Just, a couple of stints here and there that are interesting, but a whole different story. So we lived overseas for a little while. We were missionaries with IMB. And when we came home, I decided to start back with working on my counseling. I had my degree, but I had never been licensed. So I started practicing counseling. So I haven't been practicing as long as it looks like I should have. But I started counseling with a group that works with a lot of foster and adoptive children. And so that is where all of my training came from. And I just fell in love, particularly with the TBRI. And that was sort of life-changing for me and my family. And I wanted to do a lot with parents and families to kind of help them along their journey as foster parents or parents of children who have been adopted. So I did some work in that area. Then I went to another facility. I worked for in between a detention center and a group home. And I did that for a little while.
Higher level. Yeah.
Yes. Right in the middle of COVID, actually. That was a lot of work all at once. And then I needed some rest. So I went back to agency counseling. And I did that for a couple of years. And then Jared and I decided to step out, and I opened my own practice. And so I've been doing that. I think October will be 2 years, but it's been wonderful. We have an office on property out kind of in the country near Montgomery, about probably 20 minutes outside of Metro Montgomery. And there are lakes and we can walk, and I sit outside in the fall and do sessions, and it's been just an absolute blessing. When I go to, go off on vacation and I get back to work, I'm just like, oh, I'm so glad to be back here. And it's been quite amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds beautiful. I haven't had the privilege to go visit you there yet, but I do remember you and Jared. We were standing on the edge of the beach with our feet in the water and like having a conversation about this dream you had to start this practice. You know, you'd been
Yes.
working with families and kiddos for a long time, but yeah, just wanting to create something that was this vision of sanctuary. And I just thought it was
Yes.
the most beautiful thing. I'm so glad you followed the Lord's lead to do that.
Yeah, it's been more than we could have imagined. And just
Mm,
the difference from working inside an office, and actually my last office didn't have windows, to this beautiful space with, I mean, grass and lakes and trees and birds. That's my favorite.
mm,
That is it brings such peace and
mhm.
healing. And so, when I had been on that property before we were working there, I thought if I could give somebody something like this to walk into and just allow some of that as they
Yeah.
drive onto the property, the work would be, I don't know, not easier, but maybe smoother, deeper, something.
Well, and we're embodied humans, right? And so
Yes.
that I know that's a big part of your work, but just this reality that we have a whole self, you know, and so
Yes.
our senses and our experiences and everything visual and the things that we're listening to, you know, the sunlight, all of that has such an impact on how safe you feel in the like therapeutic experience.
Absolutely. Yep, that has
You knew
definitely
that.
been what I have seen just in experience and walking and hearing people and watching someone sit in the chair and be like tensed up and say, "You want to go for a walk?" And we can walk. And then it's
Yeah.
just a whole different, it's like a shift.
Yeah. Yeah, and you also get to host, you know, book clubs and soul care Saturdays and things like
Yes.
that outside of just the one-on-one relationship, which I think it's beautiful. It's just amazing to gather people around the ideas of soul care and
Yes, we have had wonderful experiences with our Soul Care Saturdays where we just bring people out and we'll do a 20-minute talk on some kind of, either we'll talk about Sabbath or self care or something like that, and then let people go out on the property for a couple of hours of just quiet. And Jared will give them poetry or something to read if they want to, or they can just walk. And then we come back together and have, soup and salad and debrief and go, and it's been wonderful. We haven't done one in quite a while, but it's the summertime again.
yeah. Yeah.
People aren't going to be signing up for, summer heat in Montgomery, so we have to take a break during the summer, but it has been wonderful.
Yeah. I love that. So, I would love to have a little conversation about your own personal journey with healing and you know some of the tools and things that have helped you. We're really big here about learning patterns. So,
Mhm.
Enneagram and attachment are great on ramps to do that.
Yeah.
And the work you do with families and couples and kiddos, and
Mhm.
it is very centered around attachment theory, right?
Yes, yes. I fell in love with attachment theory. It was one of those things that I never heard of when I was in college. Of course, I was in college a long time before I actually came to practice, but
Hmm.
but attachment theory was just not something that was taught. And so when I heard about it, it was just so eye-opening for me in my own personal journey, because I think I learned after a couple of years of marriage where there was someone with me who could, I remember saying to Jared one time, "I wish I could fall asleep and never wake up." And he said, "Sarah, that's not okay." And he said, "You should call your mom." So I called my mom, and then I called a counselor and started doing counseling. This was in the middle of studying to be a counselor.
Yeah.
And but prior to that time, I had no idea that I was depressed. And I
Mhm.
probably have been for most of my life. But I just, my little story is I just thought everybody cried all the time and was really sad about everything because you don't know until you know. And
Yeah.
so it was always a kind of a mystery to me, like, why am I this way? I have loving parents. I don't have big traumas, things like that. What happened to me?
Mm.
And attachment theory was just such an eye-opening thing, because then I looked at, the patterns of my parents and what they experienced and how their stuff impacted our relationship. And that was just a complete world changer for me.
Yeah, I agree. It to understand that there were unmet potential emotional needs, that there doesn't have to be these grand
Right.
traumas, which some people do experience, which impacts attachment. But sometimes they're just very small, little impacts
Yeah.
that create our reality, of
Mhm.
what the way the world works and how we
Yes.
find love and belonging and what that looks like. I think it was you that taught me the four
Mhm.
very simple aspects of what creates attachment
Mm.
security is give
Mhm.
care, receive care, negotiate your needs, and know your voice matters. Did I get
Yes.
them right?
Yes. Yes, you did.
And I was like,
Yes.
wow, she made that so simple because I think sometimes we can overcomplicate this idea of attachment security
Yeah.
or
And
healing.
just to be safe, sure, I did not come up with that. I learned
Okay.
that from someone. I don't know who. I'm trying to think of who where it came
Someone
from, but
else
that is
gets
not
credit.
mine.
It's not
Yes,
mine
for
either.
sure. For sure, but it is amazing, and
Yeah.
it's one of those things that you can easily remember, and it's one of those sort of, when somebody's talking to me about a relationship, or when I'm talking to my kids about their
Hmm.
own relationships, and what are you looking for when you're looking for a person that's going to, somebody that you want to spend your life with. If you can
Mm,
look at those things and see, when I'm with them, do I feel like they can give care, I can give care, receive, do I know that my voice matters in this relationship, and can I negotiate for my needs? Really, those are big things, and very, I think it can make some choices pretty easy, because if you don't feel
mhm.
like your voice matters, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and all those things, like, I think, is it Dan Siegel that talks about being,
Mm,
seen, soothed, and safe, and if you have all 3 of those things, then you know, you feel
yes.
secure. So,
Yes. I
yeah.
love Dan Siegel.
Mhm, me
It's
too,
another one
me
of
too.
those that I just can't get enough of.
I know, I know. So, another aspect of becoming aware of patterns is, I've found that the very ancient tool of the Enneagram, a wisdom tool, a way to look at, different aspects of how we were formed, how we kind of came to function in our family system, and how we solved problems and showed up in conflict and all that. So, I know you and I have talked, and you know a little bit about the Enneagram,
Just a little.
but are you open to chatting a little bit more and seeing I could do a little sample interview to see if maybe you could
Absolutely.
get closer to understanding what might fit for you?
Yep, I would love that. That would be great.
Okay. On our website, we tell people, you can download an assessment and it's a real simple way. And I break it down into different patterns. And you just let me know if something's like, "Ooh, that's me."
Yeah.
Like on my assessment, you circle as many
Okay.
that apply. So you don't
Yeah.
just pick one, because
Okay.
in the end it's like, okay, so you're higher in these and you're lower in these, and so
Okay.
you can kind of narrow it down.
Then you put it, yeah. Cool.
So and then also with gifts, so maybe the ways in which you would describe your strengths. So leadership and strength, empathy and service, creativity and imagination, analytical skills and wisdom, ambition and adaptability, loyalty and preparedness, positivity and enthusiasm. Highlight these are your best strengths. Maybe,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you have many of these. It's just what is the strongest?
Yeah, I think the empathy one,
Mhm.
and there was one that was like sounded sort of administrative. I'm a little more left brained than most counselors, and so there's some organization. I really like efficiency.
Okay, ambition and adaptability, or analytical skills and wisdom?
Analytical.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other 2 that I didn't read at the end, reforming and creating order, and then serenity and
Oop.
acceptance.
I like that one.
Okay. Yeah, I like that one too. So then on to like your needs.
Okay.
Okay. What do you feel you desire most in life? To be in control, to be loved, to be understood, to be competent, to be valued, to be secure. And these, again, we want all of these things. But
Right.
what
Those are
what is the
hard.
strongest view that are you really aware of safety and security? Are you really aware of being disconnected and unloved? So therefore you need to feel loved.
Yes. I would
Yeah.
say loved and valued would be the
Mhm.
top ones for me.
Okay. Yeah. Good. And then the others that I didn't mention is to be free and unattached, to be good or right, and to be at peace.
I think the peace one has come up more in the last few years, but
Mhm.
yeah, I still think I'm with loved and valued.
Yeah. And it is helpful to think of not necessarily just where you are now in life. So even in your 20s, would these things have been true of you?
Right.
Because that's more an indicator of your Enneagram patterns because, teens and 20s, you would have had those dominant ones, but hadn't balanced and grown in maturity as much
Yeah.
as maybe now.
It's interesting, and I wonder how much this plays into it because I was having a discussion with my best friend not too long ago, and she said that I have changed more than any person that she knows in her life. And I didn't, I was kind of taken aback by that. But so I don't know how much is different. And especially, over the last 10 years, just because of,
Hmm.
I don't know, seems like everything changed. And so I
Yeah.
just don't know with the Enneagram, does that change like, some other things that they say don't change?
Yeah. Yeah, like for instance, attachment. You can become secure. So
Yes.
so can
Yeah.
you change numbers?
Right.
I think that most all people who teach the Enneagram would say your dominant number doesn't specifically change, but you can adapt and look like a
Mm,
very different person over your lifetime and look like other numbers because you grow in the skills and the resources of many of those numbers, the healthier you get. And that's the goal, right?
yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, it doesn't mean you switch numbers. It means that you integrate and become more whole.
Mm,
Because, from a faith based perspective, I think like Jesus was perfectly all nine types. And so,
right.
as we grow in Christ likeness and that looks like sanctification, maturity, and wholeness, and all that good
Yeah.
stuff,
Right.
we look like a bunch of numbers
Mhm.
or the better
Yeah.
parts of them anyway.
Yeah.
That's the hope.
Cool.
So, yeah, I think I have a few clues. Let's talk about focus of attention. So, like
Okay.
where your attention goes. Would you, in day to day life, be more apt to be looking at what others want and less of maybe what you want in a situation? So others not necessarily needs, but their opinions or
Mm,
their agenda? Would it be your attention going on to what's making you feel anxious? Would it be attention on what needs reforming or correcting? Maybe on relationships, just generally, what are relationships like? What's happening here with me and my relationships? All that. Maybe analyzing systems and putting things in categories. If your attention wants to sort of look at things in systems,
mhm.
that's another way our attention goes. Power dynamics, like my husband is a person who he walks into a room and he's very sensitive to people who don't have power and they're more,
Mm,
in a weaker position, and then people who have too much power. His attention goes there. Mine does not
mm.
as naturally.
Yeah.
So what rings true there?
Think other people's needs, and then there was another one. No, I'm
Another one I didn't mention was what's next. So if you're in a situation and your brain just bounces to, okay, what's
yeah.
next? That's an attention thing.
I remembered it. Relationships.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That's yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, I'm seeing some patterns here. Okay. So then avoidance of what do you
Mm,
really want to avoid? Weakness? rejection, the ordinary, incompetence, failure, uncertainty, emotional pain, making any mistakes, or conflict?
All of those. Is that an answer? I think probably the biggest would be rejection. And then, the incompetence and failure and mistakes feels all the same to me.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those. I don't know. but
Yeah.
but yeah, definitely rejection is
Okay.
the primary one, I think.
Good. Okay. So I'm going to ask one more question and then I'll tell you what it sounds like as
Okay.
far as your answers. So core fear. So a little different than the wanting to avoid, but what would be something you'd be afraid of experiencing, I guess, would be a way
Mhm.
to ask it. Being controlled, being unwanted, having no identity, being depleted, being worthless, being abandoned, being trapped, corruption or being bad, or being without connection.
Okay. And I know how some of these tests and assessments work.
Yes.
So some of them sound the same, but
Yeah.
the ones that hit me were
Yeah.
unwanted, worthless, abandoned, and connectionless.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. They are very similar. But again, it's like, these different numbers, what their unconscious motivations or their
Okay.
attention, they all kind of play off each other. And
Mhm.
so what I'm seeing is, you have several yeses in the 9 category, but I think more than that is the 2 category. So those would be 2 numbers you would be probably pretty high in.
Okay.
And so 9s are the peacemakers. They're the ones that see several perspectives and are, really they can be diplomatic and they at the same time they don't like conflict. And so they can kind of be background and, just
Mhm.
not ruffle too many feathers, but they are some of the most peaceful people to be around. But then they really want that peace inside and they want peace in their relationships and things like that. So there's a lot of similarities between 9s and 2s because they're both positive reframing, positive people, and our 2s would be your helpers. So as a therapist, that would fit really well, you know, being very aware of other people's needs and wanting to move in and, you know, attune and love well and help them. What's hard for 2s is knowing their own needs sometimes.
Mhm.
So do you think that would have been true for you earlier in life before you did your work?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I often find myself, when I will talk about with clients, we'll talk about needs and they'll say, I don't really need anything. And I'm like, yep, I get it. Like, but you do. Or
Yeah.
I'll also say, having needs makes you human, not
Hmm.
needy. And
Yeah.
so, I think yes, I did not consider my own needs for many, many years to my own detriment.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's the thing is,
That was cool.
but yeah, I think knowing that maybe looking closer at the 9 and the 2, and, I have a deeper dive on those numbers I can send you. So
Cool.
it's just a fantastic thing to start seeing these things line up. And then if your spouse knows, or they know what their patterns are, you look at those side by side and you pair those up with, attachment leanings. So, you
Hmm.
may have achieved quite a bit of security now, but you have a leaning that, maybe
Yes.
if you weren't secure to begin with, that you kind of default
Yes.
to in stress.
Dismissive. Yes. Which is hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah. So it'd be fun to hear you explore that a little bit more, looking at the
Yeah.
2 and the 9. So let's move on. Thank you for
Okay.
engaging that with me. It's
Yeah.
really
It was
fun to
fun.
kind of explore it with you. Let's talk about your work with families a little bit, more about your time with kids in the foster care system or
Hmm.
adoptive families, and maybe some of the challenges that you observed while you worked with them. And do you still work with families in that
I
situation?
do. I don't do it quite the same way that I used to. I think a lot of people will come to me, um, and it'll become more of a parent coaching type situation. So that is actually one of the challenges is that I think a lot of parents want a quick fix. They want me to make their kid act right. And it's so much, especially when you're talking about children from hard places, um, which could be adoption, foster care, but it could also be early medical trauma. It's a lot about the parents' way of doing things and helping the parents understand what you did for your typically developing children is not going to work with a child from a hard place.
Mhm.
And so helping them kind of come to terms with their own stuff and what that looks like, it really is difficult because you're asking them to redo a lot of things. And I think even for me, I kind of talked about this earlier, but just seeing the patterns from my parents and how that passed on to me and how my parenting was the direction that it was going
Mhm.
because it's all I knew. So unlearning things that I thought were right and doing things differently was really hard. And it's a
Mhm.
lot of work. And so, one of the things about the trust based relational intervention is that it is a ton of work on the front end so that when you get to the older years, it's really not as much work anymore
Mhm.
because all of these things, because you have this relationship that, that has been built over a significant amount of time so that your 16-year-old knows that she can talk to you about hard things. I want to be the parent when my child gets in trouble. She doesn't think my mom's going to kill me. She thinks I got to call my mom. That is my goal. And so
Mhm.
that's a big shift and it takes some work because I can't use the typical fear-based parenting strategies that were used with me or have been taught for previous generations.
Mhm.
So I think that's one of the biggest challenges is getting parents to understand your child isn't it's one of those cliches. Your child isn't giving you a hard time. They're having a hard time.
Mm.
And a lot of these behavioral techniques that we grew up with were based on a lack of knowledge about brain development. And so what
Yeah.
we now know is that a child's brain, they're not little adults and they aren't dogs either. So that things like classical conditioning and stuff, it will change behavior, but it doesn't change the heart. And so, once they're out from under the fear, then they don't have any motivation to do things differently.
Right.
So that's and I think so another challenge that comes to mind is that traditional discipline and how it's because it's seen as biblical,
Mm.
it's causing people to look down on a more connected way of parenting or what we call gentle parenting
Mhm.
as woke. And, it's not, they're not learning anything. You're just coddling them when in
Yeah.
reality, you're teaching, which is
Mm.
that's the root word of discipline is
Mhm.
disciple and teach. And so
Yeah.
if fear is your main motivation, then you're not building relationship or trust. And that
Mhm.
is, I think that's the parent that God is to us is it's
Yeah.
building a relationship. He doesn't force us to do things.
Right.
And, God didn't give us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and sound mind. And so
Mm.
if we're trying to use fear to motivate our children, I think we're missing out.
Yeah. Yeah. I 100% agree. We know that learning doesn't happen when you're in a state of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And
Yes.
so if there's even a small threat of losing connection, so you're mad at me, or I, I disappointed you again, or whatever those things are that we inadvertently teach our kids if we come from this more harshly corrective place, because I'm all about teaching and
Absolutely.
making sure my
Yes.
kids know. But I'm with you that if you see fear in their eyes, that you're actually going backwards, because
Yes.
later in life, they're not going to be motivated from this internal sense of like safety and peace and just
Mhm.
discernment. It's going to be a hypervigilance, like something's like I'm about to make somebody mad or do something wrong or,
Right. Right.
um, yeah. Yeah. And so creating that sense of safety is so important. And I like what you said because I think it's an important part of the conversation because things can be so polarized, even parenting, you
Yes.
know,
Yes.
and like you said, some people are like, "Oh, that's just woke." Well, you can be a Bible believing family and have still reverence for teaching and scripture and like forming your children in the way that you want them to go and yet have a strong sense of like connection and safety. And, I think we know from me being an adoptive mom and working with kids in
Mhm.
foster care and you also is that you see it highlighted in these kids because you don't have them necessarily from birth, what a strong need for attachment they have. And when they
Yes.
don't have it, what's going on in their nervous system and how behaviors happen and all that stuff. So, you know, we have to learn then in those situations how to use trust and these different techniques of just, really just relationship.
Right.
um
Right.
so, but, our biological kids need that too.
Yes, yes, and that's what I learned as well is that this is, TBRI is amazing for every parent. And I think
Mhm.
that there are a couple of books that Karen Purvis wrote, she passed away a few years ago, but she is in fact, I'll send links for you to include on this because they are just the most amazing. Her videos just
Mhm.
exude love and compassion, and she had clearly a really strong relationship with Jesus and just talks about how the loving parent that God is to us and how
Mhm.
she brings that to this style of parenting, which if you could sum it up in a few words, it's connection before correction. And
Yeah.
that's just, I love you, and the reason that this is not okay is it's not, don't do that because it's wrong or whatever. It's out of love that we are correcting our children.
Mhm.
And I just, yeah. So her books changed the way that I parent with my biological children who, my own dismissive avoidant patterns had messed some stuff up pretty early on. I didn't learn all of this until mine were, 6 and 8. And so we had to do some repair, but that's
Mhm.
my favorite thing about all of this is, the plasticity of the brain and how we can change these patterns at any time.
Yeah.
Nothing is irreparable when it comes to this stuff. And so we can build those relationships with our kids at any time.
Mhm. Yeah, and I love that you said repair because that is, I mean, research does show how that is the primary factor, not that you're getting it right all the time. Like no
Yes.
one is going to be 100% secure with their kids and attuned all the time. It's impossible. We have terrible days. We go through hard seasons. Like we have mental health issues.
Yep.
But then when we recognize it and you can say, I can see how maybe the way I spoke to you in that situation might have shocked you or made you feel a little afraid because I was surprised or I felt angry for a moment and I shouldn't have spoke to you that way. Can I try it again like and do a
Yes.
redo? And
Yes.
we
Yes.
need that. We need that opportunity and our kids are so gracious to give it to us
Mhm.
to
Oh,
let us
always.
repair.
And I think, I've been thinking about this a lot just in the world today. I think humility goes a long way. It goes a
Mhm.
long way in parenting and in marriage relationships and in relationships with the world and other people. And just that idea that, you know, I'm not right all the time.
Mhm.
And I don't expect myself to be right all the time. And that's really hard for a lot of people. I think for some reason, I think particularly for my parents' generation, that was really difficult. Like there was very little teaching of, rupture and repair because
Mhm.
repair might be an apology. And an apology is not necessarily, parents don't apologize. They never do anything wrong. And so I think that's kind of one of the things that we have to come to terms with, because I didn't learn about my attachment patterns until my mom was gone. And I was angry. I was like, what are you saying? My mom was perfect, And so a lot of things that I have to do in therapy is say, your parents weren't perfect, you aren't perfect, and your kids aren't going to be perfect. And if we can start with that, then we can go from there, because it's just unreasonable expectations that we have all the way around.
Yeah. And I think logically most people would say, well, I don't expect them to be perfect, or I
Yes.
don't, but emotionally we have these beliefs that say otherwise,
Right. Yes. Yes. Well, yeah, of course that's one of my things with perfectionists. I'll ask someone, are they a perfectionist? And they'll say, well, no, everything is not perfect. Okay. Yeah. So yes is the answer, because no one can have everything be perfect, but you expect that of yourself. And so I think, we don't realize that sometimes our unreasonable expectations are what keep us so tied down and sad and, all of the things.
Yeah. So true. Yeah. So another thing that you and I have talked about that I just think is amazing, in parenting, and it's really difficult for some people, me being one of them, is play.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I have, in my coaching, it has become one of the key skills for shifting patterns is learning to play, or if you're really good at it already, using it as a resource. And so I think with families and kiddos, like, where have you seen that in your play therapy? And tell me the best stuff about play.
So there is this poster that I'm also going to send you a link for. It's from the TBRI TCU Institute. I can't remember what they call it, but I've got it in my office. It says, play disarms fear, builds connectedness, teaches social skills, and teaches competencies for life.
Mm,
and I
love
think
it.
the two most important when I'm talking to parents are play disarms fear and play builds connectedness. So often as parents, we feel like it's our job to teach them all the rules and to keep them safe and to, protect them from all the horrible things, which is not a reasonable expectation because we can't do that. But also, we are so weighed down with life that everything seems so serious. And so what does it look like to just play with your kids? This looks different over the years. And so, sometimes it's just messing around outside and throwing the football. And sometimes it's, we've gotten into a habit when the girls are both home, we'll play Liverpool Rummy, which is a game that I played when I was a kid. It's kind of like Phase 10, but it's a little different. But those kind of things, I can remember when mine were, I probably literally got back from the TBRI training and we did a yes day because they talked about yes days. And so yes days are just these days where your kids they ask you questions and you try to find a way to say yes. And so mine really, they worked hard. They were older. And so they really tried to get me. They were like, okay, can we play in the road? So I was like, okay, we're going to go out on this dead end street. I'm going to stand here, play in the road. Can we get up on the roof? Okay, let me see if I can figure this out. So we had a lower part that was only probably 3 feet off and we kind of got a ladder and climbed up there, and they went a foot away they're like, okay, this is good enough.
I don't want to
came back down. Can we play in the ditch? Absolutely. Go play in the ditch. Just things like that where I am trying to find a way to say yes. And I have to be really creative. But yes builds connection too. And so the more we can say yes, I think even in discipline, you mentioned a redo earlier. When you respond with a playful back and forth, when they start to kind of push back and maybe they're having a rough day and they're being kind of salty or whatever, and you ask them, so this is kind of typical in my house right now. Hey, can you unload the dishwasher? I don't want to. Goodness, could you try that again? Like, that wasn't very respectful. Let's try that again. That goes a lot further than, I can't believe you spoke to me that way, or whatever, And so even in our responses to their disrespect or, disagreement or disobedience, if we can playfully respond, it tunes it down. It brings it down a notch instead of bringing it up. We don't have to go up to their level. We're the adult. We get to be in control, and we get to control so somebody said, be the thermostat, not the thermometer. We get to turn it down, and we get to determine the temperature of the room. They shouldn't, because they're children, and their brains are developing, and they don't have the same capacity for regulation that we have, or that we should have.
Yeah.
That we learn to have.
Yeah, that's the problem, I think, in some cases. And when people come to me and they have all these parenting things that they're going through, most of the time I'm like, we have to get you regulated.
Yes.
Because they can't be the thermostat.
Yes.
If they're being triggered all the time and they don't have any tools to step into kind of the driver's seat of their own experience and try to, calm themselves and soothe and all that stuff, but they're just being reactive all the time. Their child disrespects them. And like you said, they're not going to kind of laugh it off and be like, let's try that again. They're like, I have to stop this. Like, you don't talk to me that way. And it's like, I mean, you can feel it. It's like you feel threatened, like your child's attacking you when they're not.
Yes.
They're developmentally, especially teenagers. Like, that is so appropriate to push boundaries and to use 100%. Their voice and to learn their independence. And we have to know that and know they're learning.
Yes. I've gotten to a place where the
learning.
word disrespect is a trigger for me, because I'm just like, what do you mean by that? Because so much of it is a child speaking up for themselves.
Yeah.
And so if you tell me that your teenager is talking back, one of the things that I try to really encourage in parents is, what are they saying? Are you listening to the words, or are you just responding to the tone? Because they don't have this regulation capabilities. And like you said, many times the parents don't either. And that's part of goes back to one of the main challenges is the parents working on their own stuff so that they can be regulated and handle these things in a way that's not, even though it feels very personal, it's not.
Yeah.
They're doing developmentally appropriate things, and they are using their voice and learning that their voice matters and negotiating for their needs. And so if my child is saying, I don't want to do the dishwasher, well, yeah, neither do I. But how can we come together on this? What can we negotiate? Is there a way for us to each get what we need and move closer together instead of separating apart? And having those skills, it's difficult to get, especially if you didn't get it. And so that's why most of the people that I see now, it's parents, because we have to come to that place of learning what we didn't get and giving it to ourselves, so that when we're ready, we can give it to our children and be more regulated.
Yeah. I know in my story, it was like most of my, let's 5-year chunks, right? Like my first 5 years of parenting was a lot of it was a lot of behavior management and things like that. And I was just having to be on it all the time. And so my system being a more anxious leaning attachment style, I was in sympathetic a lot, which we've talked about on the podcast, but just this like high energy, like anxiety, needing to fix, needing to do something about it. And then we go into caring for these kids who are in foster care and, meeting our sons who we later adopted. And this experience of learning all about trauma, learning all about connection and everything you've mentioned. Now I'm going, okay, I'm relearning all new behaviors. So on the outside, I'm having a calm and regulated response, but inside I'm still screaming like a child. Right. So that was my experience then for another 5 to 7 years. And then it was just like, so it's only been in the last like 4, 5 years that I've learned, oh man, okay, because it turned into a lot of repressed emotions and, physical manifestations of
Mm,
all of that stress because I
yes.
was still internally wanting to control and like stamp down the disrespect and all this stuff, and I had days where I would still lose it, but most of the time I knew it was like, this isn't good for them. I can't do that. I can't yell. I can't, but I was repressing all this stuff and I didn't know what to do with my own emotions because I had
Mhm.
never really learned how to regulate them. And so these last handful of years have been, wow, not only can I be the parent that they need, but I can reparent myself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I love it. I think it's so important to acknowledge that that's a process. And we learn from all of those stages. And it's not something that you can just do and okay, I'm a good parent now, or I'm secure, or it's just
Yeah.
all about the journey to get there. And I think that's also where the repair and the humility comes in, is to go back and say, you know this happened and it wasn't okay, and I want you to know that I'm really sorry, and I'm going to do better, because we're not going to get it right every time, and we're going to have those things. I mean, literally 2 nights ago, we're reading What Happened to You for book club. It's the Bruce Perry Oprah book, and it's really good. And he's like, I can't believe that we, did this thing to Lainey when she was like 1.5 years old and expected her to sit through, 3 hours of a church service and all this stuff. And we still beat ourselves up for those things. But I, I made sure to include in the book club email this time the quote, the Maya Angelou quote is, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better.
Yeah.
And I think so many times we get sort of bogged down by the mistakes that we've made, and we're
Mhm.
holding ourselves to the standard that we have now when we didn't know then. And I think
Mhm.
that's the same way that I look at the way that I was parented. My parents, generationally, they did the best they could. They really did, because they had it harder, a lot
Mhm.
harder. And so, we grow and we do better each time, and there's redemption and, all of those things that just we learn from, and it's a part of the journey. And it's what makes us who we are.
Absolutely. Pain is a teacher. It does cause us to change and it forms us into um who we become and then when you know better, you do better.
Yes.
you know?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I would love to change gears just a little bit and
Hmm.
talk about soul care because that is another skill that I teach. And I love to get your perspective on it. We both love to teach about it. And I'd like for you to share what soul care means to you and why it's so instrumental in the process of transformation.
So for me, I think this journey of soul care started probably 10 years ago when the IMB allowed us to go to a retreat with Steve Smith, who, that's where we met, was on a retreat with Steve Smith. And I honestly had never heard the term. And self care was not on my radar even. Our leaders at the time had sort of brought some stuff up. They started talking about the Sabbath. And so they taught us how to practice Sabbath. And that was pretty much all that I knew of at the time. And that's why we went, was because they wanted us to learn more about soul care. So I think for me, soul care became uh, learning how to slow down, and how to care for all the parts of me and acknowledge what those parts were, and how much I had been avoiding of that. And you know it honestly saved me, the soul care, the learning about those things. It saved me from burnout several times, because
Mhm.
I think I would have just run right into a wall. And so I think that for me, soul care is slowing down and margin and recognizing what are my goals? What am I working towards?
Mhm.
And is that is that aligned with me? Is that who I am?
Mhm.
And not and
Yeah.
doing the things that align with me and kind of not doing the things that aren't. And saying
Mm.
no to things, I think, is a big thing that I had to learn in order to be able to care for my soul. Like we were talking
Yeah.
about with parenting, you you get so caught up in doing all the things that you don't have
Mhm.
space. So creating
Yeah.
space is a big part of soul care for me.
Mm. Yes. Oh gosh. Okay, so I everything you just said matches up so well with my understanding of soul care. And, Steve Smith and Gwen, his wife, and
Yes.
Jim and Kayleen Dirksen, they're all friends of
Yes.
ours. But,
Yeah.
this idea of disengaging, which you said a lot
Yes.
about that, learning to listen to God and yourself,
Hmm.
listening. And
Mm.
then what was the last thing you said? Creating space. Okay, so you're listening and then now you're discerning your life and figuring out what it looks like to create healthier rhythms and space to breathe in your
Yes.
life.
Yes, and rhythms.
So,
I forgot rhythms because you just
mhm.
said that, but that was one of the uh, I talk about that a lot because, everybody comes to counseling and they talk about finding a balance. And I'm like, no, no. Balance is precarious and hard. Let's find rhythms. And that comes from, I think that's Steve's book, The
Yep.
Jesus Life, and where, there was engagement and disengagement and, you know, social and solitude and all of these
Mhm.
rhythms of Jesus' life that I just found to be so eye opening because
Mhm.
you don't think about that.
Yeah.
I think our Western religion is just like go, 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 do the thing. And there's very little rest taught. And I often say, that keeping the Sabbath holy is the one commandment we're good with just skipping right over. Everything
Mhm.
else, everybody's all, it's just really, it's a hard thing to do. And it's not very emphasized because everybody's so busy and doing the things.
Yeah. We're very committed to our things, right?
Yes.
Um, and
Yes.
so and that's different for everybody. And like each Enneagram number is going to have different things and
Mm-hmm.
different types of busy. Um, but I think what's human is that we all find things that are a replacement for what, um, what God wants to do,
Yeah.
in us and through us, and that requires slowing down and listening to him. We can kind of create our own thing, which we all do. I think we don't have to be
Right.
taught to do that. We find meaning and significance and,
Mm-hmm.
put those things, up on our pedestal. Like this
Yes.
is what life's
This is
all
what I'm
about.
meant to do, right?
Mm,
This is what I'm supposed to do. And it just reminds me of Steve saying, we are human beings, not human
yeah,
doings. And so what does
exactly.
it look like to be who God created us to be, not just do what he created us to do?
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is I've heard it said so much is that like, you can be so heavenly minded that you're no earthly good. Like if you just sit around like a monk and like, listen and pray and you don't do anything, like that's not like Jesus. It's more that you can't pour from an empty cup. You can't
Yes.
give what you don't
Yes.
have. And so we need to disengage. We need to
Yes.
listen and we need to create space and rhythms that are sustainable so that we can do what God has for us well.
And I think Jesus taught us that. Like he showed us that. We just kind of skip over those parts where he went off to be alone or he,
Yeah.
all of those things that it talks about.
Yeah.
I think that because we like to do things and we like to check the boxes and we're very task oriented,
Mhm.
much more so than I think the Eastern world was back then, that,
Mhm.
we've taken it and we've made it our own. And it's just so busy and so
Yeah.
tiring.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I always think of that first scripture, the very first retreat we went on with you guys at Oak Island, that
Mm,
the scripture, it's the message version of Matthew 11:28 through
yes.
30 is, come to me all who are
Mm,
weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest, and
yeah.
this version says, walk with me and work with
Mm,
me and, watch how I am living, I
yes.
will show you how to take a real rest.
Mm,
And that's what you were saying is that if you just watch, like Jesus was a very good example of what it looks like to be and
yeah.
then to do,
Right.
you know?
Right. Yes.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I love that we have this in common and that we can, talk about it and hopefully more and more people will incorporate soul care into their rhythms because it's so needed
Yes.
for the healthy family system, for
Mhm.
relationships, for healing and wholeness.
Yep. For our bodies, for
Yeah.
our own selves as well.
Yeah, exactly. So, would you have any last advice for somebody who feels overwhelmed in their family life and they, maybe what we're talking about, this busyness, these demands? Any tips or advice before we go?
Yeah. I think that as people are leaving in my sessions, we talk about margin and the concept of, taking care of yourself. And I cannot tell you how many times I have asked, what do you do to take care of yourself? And people look at me with a blank stare. And most of the time they'll say, like, I go to the gym or I take a shower. And I'm like, oh, okay. So basic things. But I think, looking at your own life, I have this illustration that I try to get Chat GPT to like do for me. And it was terrible. It's comical, actually. But if you picture your life as a Coke bottle and you have hoses going in, and those represent the things that fill you up, and you have hoses coming out, and those are the things that are sucking away from your life. You have to have more going in than you have going out. Otherwise, you will be at a deficit. And so, if you can look at your life and think of those things that are the energy depleters and the energy infusers, can you take away one energy depleter and add an infuser? Simply just look at your
Mm,
life and see if there's something that you said yes to that you didn't really want to do and that isn't working for you, and you're just doing it because you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings or because nobody else will do it or any of those different things. Consider letting that go
mhm.
and then add something to that. So, it's that concept of putting off and putting on that we see in Paul's letters. Like, so put off something and put on a positive of
Yeah.
something that gives you life, whatever that is, whether it's taking a walk around the neighborhood or going to a class or, learning how to crochet, doing something creative, things like that. Like
Mhm.
find a little thing and then see how that changes because you can't pour from an empty cup. You said that. And
Mhm.
I think we don't realize just how empty we are sometimes. So I would encourage those listening who are feeling just exhausted, take a minute to examine your life and see if there's one thing you can take away and one thing you can add.
Mm. That's such good advice. You have a vessel, right? Can you add more things to keep filling so that you're not just depleted all the time? So
Yeah.
good. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate all your thoughts and your wisdom. I just think that you have such a, such a heart to make complicated ideas simple
Mm.
for the everyday parent or, woman or whatever to just understand how this applies to our life, to our parenting, to our relationships. And so
Yeah.
I appreciate
Thank you.
yeah, everything that you bring to this work and for your time.
Thank you.
So
It was so fun.
yeah, I love talking to you. We'll do it
Yeah, me
again.
too. Yeah.
I'll close this with a blessing. May you be aware and open to everything that comes to you today, welcoming it all for your transformation.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Transforming Us podcast. We hope that you enjoyed the conversation and that you found it helpful. If you loved what you heard, we would really appreciate if you would take a moment and leave us a 5-star review and rating. Your support helps us reach more listeners like you.
And also, don't forget to follow us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more relationship content. Then, if you're looking to take your growth to the next level, check out our coaching services and groups at transformingus.org.
We're here to help you transform your patterns and enjoy more secure relationships.
Until next time, in the words of Raoul Shane, you do not need to do big things. Just do small things in a big way. Then, transformation will follow you.